Imran Ahmed is Chief Executive of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. Imran, thanks for joining me.
Good evening.
Could you, if you like, kick off by giving us an assessment of what the problem is with digital hate on the internet?
Well, we have a problem where there is a lack of accountability and there's a culture of impunity for hate, for things like people, sort of spivs taking advantage of these platforms' inability and unwillingness to moderate and enforce their own community standards, to spread misinformation about, everything from snake oil salesmen about vaccines or Vladimir Putin about the Ukraine. And what we've had is we've got these enormous tech companies which basically built business models where they gather lots and lots
like the Metas of the world and so forth, and the Twitters and people like that. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that Facebook, which is now named Meta, yeah. Twitter, TikTok, which is, Chinese state affiliated, or and what you have is these companies which sort of gather lots of content from people, take all the data out, sell that to people, making enormous amounts of money out of it. I mean, let's not forget, Facebook is one of the world's biggest companies. Mark Zuckerberg, before the age of 40, was worth $100 billion. And they've done that by ruthlessly exploiting other people's data and content, and then saying it's nothing to do with us, Gov, when problems are caused on those platforms, problems which have, major consequences, whether that is, for example, the assault on the Capitol on January the 6th, 2021. It's the thousands of people who've died in ICUs telling their doctors, but I thought the vaccine would harm me and I wasn't sure about it. Or it is the spread of hate to, for example, British footballers who, at the World Cup, that really disgraceful moment which made all of us feel quite ashamed and grubby, really.
But it's also there for people who will, who could respond through downward pressure on them that leads them, youngsters, to suicide, self-harm. Right. Which, there's some very powerful personal stories out there about how this has gone wrong. Does the bill, if you like, deal with this problem?
So when I first started looking at the problems of online harms around 6-7 years ago, I went to speak to a friend of mine who had a great business career, worked in politics, Lord Young. And I asked him, what's the big difference between the way these guys think, these sort of oligarchs of Silicon Valley, and normal business people? And he said they just don't care about the impact that they have on society. It's just all about the naked accrual of wealth. And the duty of care that companies have to users, society, the nation, that's actually well established in law. It's basically the area of law called negligence. But in the US, which is where most of these companies are based, there is this really curious quirk of the law, which was passed in 1996, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which exempts social media companies specifically from being subject to any kind of accountability for the harms they produce through their activities.
Which is extraordinary, really.
It is bananas, really. And I mean, you can imagine that after it's now 26 years since that legislation was passed, an entire generation of tech executives have grown up thinking that they have both legal and moral sort of culpability. They have no moral culpability for what happened, what harms their businesses produce, because they can't be held legally liable. And this is the first bit of legislation anywhere in the world to comprehensively say we're actually going to enact a duty of care, and we're going to give teeth to that duty of care by having a regulator that if you fail to observe your duty of care when it comes to pro-suicide material, self-harm material, racist material, and not taking reasonable steps to try and reduce the prevalence of it, well, we're going to fine you, or we might end up chucking one of your executives in jail if you really take the mickey.
Presumably, these businesses, you'd have to go after their UK offices, because that's the reach of UK law, isn't it? So if Facebook had a business here, we could go after them there. I mean, in practice, do you think that that's going to work?
Look, I mean, I think that the UK is a big economy. Most of these companies have got assets and people in the UK. And so therefore there are means of accountability, but you identify a weakness, and that is that these companies are primarily US based. In fact, a lot of the bad actors, the people, the sort of the snake oil salesmen of the anti-vax industry are American for the main part. And so this is a problem in America. I mean, you know, you and I are talking, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, and the reason I came here 2 years ago was because I didn't think I could finish this mission of reducing digital hate and misinformation unless I confronted them on their home territory, which is the United States. But the UK is still a big economy. And we should be proud of that. And we're also the first country in the world to get some legislation out there.
Do you think
and we should be very proud of that.
Sorry, I cut you off there. Are others, Imran, and you talk about America, are they actually seriously contemplating this? Are they looking and seeing if it's going to work? Or is there a sense in America that no, a platform is a platform, we've got this legislation, we are resistant to change?
Oh, I think that changed after January the 6th, and with I think three things have changed it. One, January the 6th. Second, the prevalence.
When you say January 6th, you're talking about the storming of the Capitol.
The storming of the Capitol, yes. And then also the problems that America's had with anti-vaxxers, which have been much worse than in the UK and some of the other advanced democracies. But also, more importantly, the testimony given by Frances Haugen, the whistleblower from Facebook, who gave evidence to Congress saying, you know, actually, Facebook know that they're causing enormous damage to young children,
that's true.
And yet
Absolutely.
they're unwilling to do anything about it. And look, I gave evidence to the Congress, to the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which is the legislative committee that would do regulation, in December myself, and there was 40 bills there that were up, which were all about regulating social media. It's not that there's a deficit of people saying we need to do something, it's that they haven't actually cohered on a single solution yet. I mean, the truth is that in May, CCDH, the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which I run, we're bringing together legislators from the UK, US, EU, New Zealand, Australia, Canada in Washington to talk about what we've all been doing in the past 2 years. And, you know, legislators, just like the rest of us, have also been socially isolated and haven't been able to talk to each other in person. So we're saying time for us to get together and tell each other what we've been up to in the last 2 years so we can share ideas. And actually the UK, because it has the most advanced legislation, it has a lot to say there. It can say we've done this.
What about, quickly on the final point, do you think that the problem of the threat to the freedom of the press, i.e. freedom of speech, has been dealt with the modifications that have been put forward? Or do you think that we are in danger of stifling free speech?
Well, I mean, look, there's always a tension between the two things. But, I mean, at this point, even with this legislation in place, they still wouldn't be subject to the full regulation that, say, a TV channel, let alone a newspaper, is subjected to. So, you know, whereas a newspaper knows that it is a publisher and therefore is fully responsible for the content on its website, in its newspaper, it's not. That's not the extent.
I mean, the threat is, just to explain to people, is the threat is the search engine could decide something posted by the Daily Mail conflicts with policy, puts them at risk, and they want to take it down. But they've introduced measures that mean that there's a process of appeal, and it can't just go, isn't it? Do you think that's enough, in a word?
I do, and look, the proof will be in the execution and the pudding and of what we do with these powers when we have them. And you know, I'll be back damn straight if we think that the government isn't doing a good enough job of using its new powers.
Okay, listen, Imran, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Imran Ahmed, Chief Executive of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. Do you think it does what it says on the tin, the Online Harm Bill? And do you think there is too much exposure to harm, particularly to our young kids, those who come under extreme pressure and influence that end up ultimately harming themselves and some taking their own lives?